Hey, it's Diana from Diana Marie Home. Today I'm going to show you how to make a DIY pleated lampshade. There seems to be a trend going around on social media with these pleated lampshades, and they can get pretty pricey if you're buying them in the store, which there's nothing wrong with that, but I like to try my hand at DIY when things are pricey and see what I can come up with. So a while back, I found this cute little lamp from Target, which I bought for my kitchen. I wanted a little kitchen lamp. The base was another color, I can't remember, and I painted it with the color I painted my kitchen floor with, which I recently changed. I think it's called Rolling Pebbles by Bear. So that's super cute. And then the shade that it came with, I just didn't love the shape of, but I found this one at the thrift store for a couple dollars. And I love the shape of it, but the shade was just dented and just wasn't what I was looking for totally. It's gonna be the perfect shade to try this DIY pleated lampshade with. So all you need for this project is a lamp and lampshade, scissors, fabric, a lighter fabric so light can still get through. This is just cotton muslin that I probably got from the thrift store for like 50 cents. I'm going to be using that, an iron, and a hot glue gun. I am using my Greenworks cordless hot glue gun. If you are a crafter, this is a game changer. I love this thing. So that's all you need. Let's get to it. So I have further detailed instructions for how to do this DIY on my blog, but if you're like me, I like to watch something done first and then go back later to the written directions. It helps me understand it. So right here, I'm just ironing my fabric really good. It was really wrinkled after I washed it, so I'm just ironing it all out. And then I'm checking to make sure that I have enough to wrap all the way around my lamp, because before I do anything, I want to cut out strips to save as the finishing trim pieces for the top and bottom. So I had enough, and then I'm just figuring out how much I want to cut out. So for this trim piece, it's going to be folded in half and then folded in half again. So you want to make sure that you cut out a wide enough piece for the top and bottom trim pieces. If you don't want the finishing edges on the top and bottom, then you can skip this step. But I wasn't sure what I wanted to do at this point in the project, so I decided to just cut them out and put them aside just in case. But after I finished the project, I ended up deciding that it would have made more sense for me to use this method of cutting long strips when I was making the actual pleats for the lampshade. So it might be good just to kind of take note about how I am cutting these long strips, whether you want to do the trim pieces or not. I'll talk a little bit more about the different ways to make the pleats when we get there, but I just wanted to point that out. So here I'm just finishing cutting up that strip, and then once I get that done, I fold it in half and use my iron to create a nice seam in that what will be the final trim piece. And this is what we're also going to do when we make the pleats as well. Here's where I'm measuring how long each pleat needs to be, and I wanted to give myself some extra space since I wasn't sure if I was going to use those trim pieces or not, so I wanted some extra fabric on both the bottom and top to be able to fold over in case I decide to leave the finishing trim pieces off. However, this is the part where, in hindsight, I wish instead of trying to cut the strips to size in the beginning, I wish I just cut one long strip like I did for the trim pieces and then cut each pleat to size as I attached it to the lamp. It would have made the fabric go farther, and I think it just would have been a little bit easier than cutting all of these individual pieces out at first. But here I'm just trying to figure out how wide I want each pleat to be to figure out how wide to cut each piece of fabric. I wanted my pleats to be a bit farther apart, so I ended up cutting my fabric, I'd say about 4 inches wide, because then it gets folded in half and you need to make sure that you have enough to overlap with the pleat that will be on top of it, if that makes sense. If not, I think it will make sense once we see how the pleats get added to the lampshade. Here I am just cutting out each individual pleat using the previous one as a template. And again, if I were to make this project again, I would just be cutting out long strips instead of these strips that are measured to size for my lamp. I guess that's kind of the thing about DIY. As you go, you learn, and that's one of the reasons why I really love sharing here, because I learned so much just reading about other people's experience with DIY, and then I can take what they did and what they learned and modify it for how I think it will work best for me when I do the project. So hopefully by sharing what I do and what I learned, it can help you if you want to try this project as well. So here I'm just taking those pleats that I cut out, folding them in half and ironing the crease into them, which will make the nice sharp pleat look when we attach them to the lamp. Again, this is just like those trim pieces, and doing this again, I would cut out the long strips and iron them down the middle, just like I'm doing here, but they would be long strips instead of short. Here is where I started attaching them to the lampshade, and I'm not gonna lie, I was a little bit nervous when starting out just because I knew it was gonna be slightly more challenging with the tapered lampshade. Here I'm using my cordless hot glue gun that made this project so much easier, attaching the first pleat. Now on the first pleat, it's important to only glue half of the pleat down instead of the full pleat like we will for the rest of them. You can see I'm pulling the fabric back a little here, and we're doing that because then on the last pleat it can be tucked under and you won't be able to tell where you started and finished. So just a little dab of glue to glue that back side of the pleat or the rough side of the pleat down, making sure that the folded piece can be lifted up for the last pleat to tuck under. So you can see where I have those long edges. If you don't want the final trim, you want to leave edges like that, but if you plan on using the final trim, I would recommend cutting those off right at the lamp base, which I'll talk about more later because that's something else that I would have changed doing this again. So here I am adding the second pleat, and on this one I am gluing it all the way across. So the entire rim on the top and bottom will have a line of glue securing it to the lamp. And when you're using a pleated lampshade, you want to make sure that the pleats on the top are closer together than the pleats on the bottom, because if they're equal distance, then as you go on, it will not look right. So that was the trickiest part with the tapered lampshade. But I just checked in as I went and it ended up working out pretty good. You can see how the top pieces are closer together and then the bottom piece is farther apart. So I just went around the entire lampshade doing this same process over and over until I made my way around. Now this isn't exactly the last pleat, but because the top of the lampshade is tapered, it was starting to run into that first pleat. So I decided here to trim off some of that extra fabric just so it wouldn't build up as I was tucking it under the first pleat to hide it. So I glued the bottom down and then used my scissors just to cut off some of that extra fabric that would be covered by the next pleat anyways. I continued to do that with the finishing pleats, just cutting off the extra fabric as I went. Getting the end to blend in with the beginning is probably the trickiest part of this project, but it really isn't too bad, and this is why we didn't glue that first pleat down all the way. I just eyeballed how much extra fabric needed to be cut off, making sure that I wouldn't cut too far in so that the cut was still covered by the next pleat. This is the final pleat, probably the trickiest, but again, not too hard. This whole project really was pretty simple and definitely worth it for how well it turned out in my opinion. But here I'm just cutting off the extra fabric before I even attach it, just to prevent myself from cutting any of the visible pleats. I pull that first pleat back because it's not all the way glued down, tuck that last one in there, and get some glue on that. Secure that to the top. Secure the bottom piece, and then once that is all set, I add glue to secure that initial pleat down to the last. So simple, and honestly I was pretty impressed with how it turned out. I can't even tell where it started and finished, so it worked really well. Here I'm cutting the extra fabric off. So if you don't want the finishing trim, I recommend doing what I'm doing here and leaving just a little more than a half an inch, I would say, to fold under. If you want the finishing trim, which is what I'm doing here, I would cut the edges right to the rim of the lampshade because I just had too much extra fabric. Here I'm just attaching that finishing trim piece that we saved in the beginning by starting on the outside, adding a tab of glue, and then working my way around. The part that gets a little tricky about this is the fabric can kind of get a little wonky and bunch up, so you just want to make sure that you're smoothing out the fabric and working in small sections as you go around the base of the lamp. Once you get to the beginning, you want to leave some extra fabric here because we're going to create a finishing line. Cut off the extra and then fold it over and add a little glue to secure that fold, and then add another piece of glue to secure the end of the trim to the lamp. Now that the trim piece is around the top of the rim, I work to slowly tuck that in and under the lamp and secure it with the glue. If you didn't have all that extra material from the pleats, this step would be a lot easier to do. Now I'm doing the same thing, but for the bottom piece of trim. Just adding a dab at the bottom to attach the trim piece and then slowly working all the way around the base of the lamp. And then just using glue to tuck that finishing trim piece underneath the lamp to create the finished trim. And here is finished. I really like the way that it turned out. I think it's so cute. You can definitely tell it's DIY. It's not perfect by any means, but that's kind of what I was going for with this. I didn't want it to have a perfect store-bought look. I wanted it to look cozy and homemade, and I think it really took the simple store-bought lamp to the next level and just added a lot of character and coziness, especially to this space. I love it. Thanks for hanging out with me today while I made this DIY pleated lampshade. I hope this was helpful. If you want to see more pictures or make one yourself, you can find more pictures of it styled in my home, more pictures of this tutorial, and detailed instructions on my blog, dianamarieHome.com. Let me know if you give this DIY a try, and I will see you in the next video.